November 18, 1952. The sky over North Korea is about to become the most dangerous place on Earth. 2 American jets, 7 Soviet fighters, and a secret so explosive, both governments buried it for 50 years. What you're about to hear is not a war movie. This is real. This happened. And the man who lived it only got the recognition he deserved 70 years later. My name is not important. What is important is that somewhere over the freezing waters of the Sea of Japan, a single American pilot did something that military historians still struggle to explain. He fought 6 Soviet MiGs simultaneously, alone, for 30 minutes, and he won. But before we get to the fight, let's talk about the world that created it. Because you cannot understand how insane this moment was without understanding just how close humanity was standing to the edge of nuclear annihilation in November 1952. The Korean War had been grinding for over 2 years. American forces, operating under the United Nations flag, were slugging it out against North Korean and Chinese troops along a frozen, miserable peninsula. But there was a third player in this war that nobody was officially supposed to talk about: the Soviet Union. Stalin's pilots were flying combat missions over Korea in secret. Soviet ground crews were maintaining North Korean aircraft. Soviet radar operators were tracking American bombers. The entire arrangement existed in a kind of unofficial shadow war, where both superpowers were actively killing each other's people while publicly pretending they weren't. This arrangement had one golden rule: one line neither side could cross without blowing the whole fragile fiction apart. Soviet pilots could not be caught. Soviet planes could not be downed in ways that could be proven. If an American pilot spotted the red star of the Soviet Air Force on an enemy wing, he was supposed to look the other way, because the alternative was unthinkable. Elmer Royce Williams understood none of this when he climbed into his F-9F-5 Panther that morning. He was 26 years old, a naval aviator with good instincts and a cool head. His job that day was simple on paper: let a small section of Panthers to strike a target near the Soviet border, protect the fleet, come home. Simple. He had no idea he was about to stumble into a confrontation that would nearly trigger the Third World War. The F-9F Panther was America's answer to the jet age. Grumman built it tough, with straight wings and a single Pratt and Whitney turbojet buried in its belly. Pilots loved its handling at lower speeds. They loved its roll rate. But they were under no illusions about where it stood in a fight against the MiG-15. The MiG was faster. It climbed better. It could reach altitudes the Panther could only dream of. In a straight performance comparison, the Soviet jet won almost every category. The Panther's one real advantage in a turning fight was its ability to bleed speed in a tight radius and stay inside a MiG that was going too fast to follow. But that advantage meant nothing if you were outnumbered 7-1. Williams and 3 other Panthers were pushing north, closing in on their target area, when the radio crackled. The strike force had picked up contacts. 7 of them. Bogies. Incoming fast. Protect the fleet at all costs. 7 against 4. Those were bad odds. Then they got worse. Williams's flight leader came on the radio almost immediately. Engine trouble. Terminal. He had to turn back, and his wingman had to go with him. Just like that, 4 became 2. Williams and his wingman, Lieutenant Dave Rowlands, were alone at altitude, watching their backup disappear into the clouds below. Williams looked up. Contrails. 7 thin white lines scratched across the cold blue sky above him. He still believed they were North Korean. He had no reason to think otherwise. North Korean jets had been aggressive all week. This was not unusual. He had no idea that 83 miles to the north, at a Soviet airfield just outside Vladivostok, a radar operator had been tracking the American formation for 20 minutes. And that Captain Nikolai Belyakov, a veteran Soviet fighter pilot, had already scrambled with 6 of his best men in MiG-15 bis jets, the most advanced swept-wing fighters the communist world had produced, and they were coming down like a hammer. Belyakov split his formation into 2 groups before the engagement. Classic Soviet doctrine. One group would come from above. The other would attack from the flanks. The Americans would be surrounded before they even saw the first pass. Williams and Rowlands were climbing through 26,000 feet when the contrails above them suddenly vanished. That was the moment Williams should have felt his blood go cold. Contrails don't just stop. Pilots make contrails stop by descending into warmer air. The MiGs were coming down. He never saw the first pass coming. The impacts came out of nowhere. a sound like gravel thrown against a tin roof, holes appearing in the fuselage, tracers slicing past the canopy close enough to read. The first MiG had already made its gun run and was pulling away before Williams even registered he was under attack. He broke hard. Rowlands broke with him. The two Panthers rolled and twisted, trying to put as much disruption between themselves and the next attacker as possible. A second MiG came through, then a third, each one diving, firing, pulling away. Hit and run. The Soviet pilots were disciplined. They weren't getting into a turning fight with the Americans. They were slashing through like sharks, picking apart the Panthers with each pass. A fourth MiG lined up its shot. The shells it was firing were not the light rifle caliber rounds of World War II. These were 23mm and 37mm cannon shells, each one capable of tearing through metal like it was cardboard. The Panthers were being shredded. And then Williams did something the Soviet pilots were not expecting. Instead of continuing to evade, he tightened his turn at exactly the right moment, slid in behind the fourth MiG as it pulled away, and put the enemy jet in his gun sight. The MiG pilot, Senior Lieutenant Pokomkin, felt the impacts before he heard the warning from his instruments. Something had punched through his airframe. Smoke began filling the cockpit. He came on the radio, voice tight. He had been hit. He could see two Americans behind him. He broke downward and ran. Rowlands went after him. That was the decision that changed everything. Because the moment Rowlands dove after the wounded MiG, Williams was alone, completely and utterly alone, against the three remaining Soviet jets above him, who had now watched one of their comrades get shot down and were turning back with something very different in their eyes. And then the radio call came, not from his wingman, not from the strike group, from the National Security Agency. American intelligence had been listening to the Soviet radio transmissions the whole time. They knew exactly who these pilots were, and they had one message: do not engage. This could start World War III. Williams heard the warning. He pressed the transmit button. 3 words: I'm already engaged. There is something about those 3 words that says everything you need to know about Royce Williams. He wasn't being reckless. He wasn't being heroic for the cameras. There were no cameras. There was no audience. There was just a man in a damaged airplane, alone, outnumbered, with enemy jets already turning back toward him, and he told the truth. He was already in it. Telling him not to fight was like telling a man who has already jumped off a cliff not to fall. WWII came back in with his remaining jets in a diving pass. 3 MiGs against 1 Panther. Head on, all guns firing. Williams flew straight at them. No dodge, no break. Straight into the teeth of the attack, because turning away meant giving them a clean shot at his tail, and he knew it. The 3 jets screamed past each other. No hits on either side. The airspeed and the angles conspired to make everyone miss. Williams hauled back on the stick to gain altitude. He needed height. Height was life. Height was options. And that's when the other group of 3 MiGs came at him from the opposite direction. He hadn't forgotten them. He had just lost track of them in the chaos. Now there were 6 MiGs in the fight. 6 against 1. And every single one of them had a gun. What followed was 30 minutes of combat flying that defies easy description. Williams rolled. He dove. He pulled into turns so tight the blood drained from his head and his vision narrowed to a gray tunnel. He used every trick the Panther had. Its roll rate saved him twice. Its turn radius saved him at least 3 more times. The Soviet jets were faster, but speed is a liability in a close-range turning fight, and Williams kept dragging the combat into close range where his pursuers had to slow down or overshoot. 4 MiGs flew past in a loose formation, and Williams found himself behind them, just for a moment, with a firing solution. He took it. The Soviet pilot in his crosshairs looked back and saw the Panther and immediately broke upward toward the sun. Directly into the sun. Williams followed for a second before the light burned everything white, and he had to pull away blind. He rolled out of the sun and found 2 MiGs coming straight down at him. No time, no options. He pointed his nose at them and fired. The lead MiG, Belayakov himself, flinched, pulled away at the last second. His wingman, Senior Lieutenant Alexander Vandov, did not. Vandov had made a decision in a fraction of a second that he would not be the one to break. He held his course. He kept his trigger down. So did Williams. 2 jets, 2 guns, converging at a combined closing speed that left almost no time for anything. A 20mm shell found Vandov's cockpit. The MiG went silent. No evasive maneuver. No radio call. The aircraft simply rolled inverted and passed underneath Williams, engine still running, going nowhere now. Vandiv was dead before the plane finished its roll. Williams was already looking for the next threat. His instincts were running the show now. Thought was too slow. Another MiG swung across his canopy, and he fired on pure reflex. The jet staggered. 2 kills. The sky was suddenly a little less crowded. Belayakov had watched 2 of his pilots die in seconds. His wingmen, his comrades. He turned back. Hard. Whatever discipline had governed his tactics before was replaced by something older and more personal now. He came straight at Williams. Williams met him head-on again. There was almost no time to aim. Both pilots fired short bursts as they closed. Pieces came off Belayakov's MiG. The Soviet jet pulled through the engagement and dove away, trailing smoke. Out of the fight, Williams thought it might be over. It wasn't. A MiG he hadn't tracked dropped in behind him and opened fire before Williams could react. This time the hits were different. He felt it in his stomach before his brain caught up. A 37mm shell punched through his wing and kept going into the engine compartment. The hydraulic system, the network of fluid-filled lines that controlled his rudder and flaps and half his ailerons, was gone in an instant. The Panther lurched, became something different, something frightening. Williams tried to roll, and the aircraft responded like a sick animal, sluggish and reluctant, fighting him for every degree of bank. The rudder was gone. His flaps were gone. He had his elevator and about half his roll authority, and that was it. The MiG behind him had no such problems. It stayed locked on, pouring fire into the wounded jet. Williams did the only thing he had left. He used his elevator, pulled up, then pushed down, riding a porpoising wave through the sky, trying to make himself just unpredictable enough to survive long enough to reach the clouds still 10,000 feet below him. Shells kept hitting, each one a potential killing blow. He was counting on luck, and luck was running out. And then Roland's came back. The wingman appeared out of nowhere, guns blazing, forcing the final MiG to break off. Williams dove into the cloud cover and leveled off, for 100 feet above the ocean, hands shaking, aircraft groaning around him. He was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. But the fight was over. The landing was about to begin. And in some ways the landing was going to be even harder. He could not slow below 170 knots. At that speed, the missing hydraulics made the aircraft twitch and wobble in ways that made controlled flight feel like a suggestion rather than a certainty. 170 knots is roughly 195 miles per hour. A normal carrier landing happens around 130 knots. Williams was going to hit the deck 65 miles per hour faster than a normal approach, in an airplane that couldn't reliably hold its heading. He looked down at the sea. Ejection was not an option. The water was cold enough to kill a man in 20 minutes. Maybe less. No helicopter could reach him in time. He had to land. He called the carrier. Minimum speed 170 knots. Maneuverability severely compromised. He could hear in his own voice that he was barely holding it together. USS Oriskany's commanding officer, Captain Courtney Shantz, heard the call and made a series of decisions very quickly. He cleared the deck. He ordered the crash crews to positions. He got his ship moving as fast as it could directly into the wind to add every knot of headwind he could give Williams, which would effectively lower the pilot's ground speed for the trap. Williams lined up on approach. He lowered his landing gear because he had no choice. The added drag immediately pulled the nose sideways. He fought it back, lost it, fought it back again. The carrier was in his windscreen, but he was drifting off centerline, and the combination of his speed and his damaged controls made corrections slow and unpredictable. He was going to miss. Shantz saw it from the bridge. He raised his binoculars and understood exactly what he was looking at. Williams was offset from the flight deck. He wasn't correcting fast enough. A wave off, a go-around, would almost certainly kill him. The airplane didn't have enough control authority to survive another approach. Shantz had seconds to act. He turned the ship. The entire aircraft carrier, 80,000 tons of steel and machinery, swung its bow to put the flight deck in line with Williams's approach path. Course corrections kept coming from the bridge as the ship moved and Williams moved, and the two slowly came into alignment. 500 yards out, 250, 100. The deck was still moving beneath him, but there was no more time for adjustments. Williams committed. The Panther hit the deck at roughly 200 miles per hour. The third arresting cable caught. The aircraft lurched forward against the wire, decelerated from 200 to 0 in less time than it takes to exhale, and stopped. Royce Williams sat in the cockpit of a machine that had just absorbed 263 holes. The wing damage was so extensive that engineers later said they had no explanation for why it hadn't simply snapped off during the fight. The plane was done. Williams was not. He climbed out, and then the cover-up began. Both governments understood immediately what had happened and what it meant. If this engagement became public, the fiction that Soviets were not actively fighting Americans in Korea collapsed entirely. The diplomatic consequences could be catastrophic. Both sides were still holding nuclear weapons and eyeing each other with barely concealed hostility. A confirmed aerial engagement between American and Soviet pilots was exactly the kind of incident that could spiral beyond anyone's control. So it disappeared. Gun camera footage was reviewed, and any frame showing Soviet markings was removed. Radio transcripts were edited, every reference to Soviet fighters replaced with the generic word enemy. Witnesses were quietly reminded that what they had seen was classified. Williams was awarded the Silver Star, a significant decoration, but the citation was scrubbed clean of anything that might explain what he had actually done to earn it. He went on flying. He served the Navy for decades, retiring in 1980. He went home. He lived quietly. And for 50 years he told nobody. Not because he was ashamed, not because he had forgotten, but because he had given his word. And Royce Williams was the kind of man who kept it. The documents were declassified in the early 2000s. When the story finally went public, the response on both sides of the ocean was remarkable. Russian aviation historians confirmed the losses. 3 MiGs. They framed it differently, suggesting their pilots had been ambushed, but the numbers matched. 3 aircraft. 3 pilots. One of them Vandev, who had refused to break and paid for it with his life. The American government looked at the Silver Star sitting in Williams's medal case and understood that it was wrong. Not wrong because he hadn't earned it. Wrong because it wasn't enough. In 2022, the Navy Cross was awarded retroactively. 70 years late, Williams was 96 years old. He stood in his uniform and accepted the decoration with the same quiet composure that had probably saved his life over the Sea of Japan in 1952. And then came the word that he might be in line for something even higher. The Medal of Honor, the one decoration that sits above everything else in the American military. The conversation is ongoing. As of now, it has not been awarded. But Royce Williams is 100 years old, and he is still here. And the people who know what happened on November 18, 1952, believe that if anyone has earned the right to wear that medal, it is the man who looked at 7 enemy jets and 3 words from an intelligence agency telling him not to fight, and simply said, "I'm already engaged." There are a lot of ways to measure courage. You can measure it in medals. You can measure it in the number of enemies you faced. You can measure it in the holes in your airplane when you finally land. But maybe the truest measure is something quieter than any of that. Maybe it is sitting on a secret for 50 years because you said you would. Maybe it is climbing into a cockpit one more time after everything that happened in that cockpit last time. Maybe it is being 100 years old and finally getting to tell the truth about the day you flew alone against 7 and came back. Royce Williams flew that day. He fought. He survived. And then, for half a century, he kept faith with a world that wasn't ready to hear what he had done. Now it is. If this story moved you the way it moved me while writing it, share it with someone who needs to hear it. These stories don't belong buried in declassified files and dusty archives. They belong out here, where people can actually find them. Subscribe if you haven't. There are more of these coming, and every single one of them deserves to be remembered.